Today I'll be reviewing the latest LED light from Nanlite. This is the Pavotube 215X. I'm Richard, welcome to ZP Productions. This is the Pavotube 215X and I will bring you this review. Now, I'd like to thank SLR Revolution for loaning me this copy of the light, and I intend to purchase it myself because these lights are really nice. So without wasting time, let's talk about what's the difference between this light and the older version, which I have here. And of course, what to expect out of this newer Pavotube 215X. Firstly, out of the box, I will tell you that this is heavier. It is heavier. And also not only that, it is also shorter. So if I was to put it side by side like this, you can see that the whole tube is about 4 inches shorter than the older Pavotube. Now, this new Pavotube 215X also has additional mounts. It has a top mount here. It has a back mount. And it has another back mount here. Then there is, of course, the DMX port here, which you require a cable to break out to in and out. And then there is a standard charging port, the same charging port as the older Pavotubes. Now, one thing to note about the Pavotube is that this is now made of metal and aluminum. It is a rigid body. You can see no twist. While the older version, a little bit of twist. The controls are also drastically different. The older one has a switch at the front, and then the controls at the back, and then 2 knobs to quickly change the settings. While the old ones, you can see here from the top down, is there is an on-off button, and once you on, there is the mode dial. You have to switch the mode one by one and then press the setting accordingly. Now, there is pros and cons to such a control mechanism. Firstly, it is more accurate, but it is slower. The older, knobs are just so much quicker. I mean, look at this, how fast I can turn the knob, and then how fast can I press the button. Even I hold it down, it still turns slower than the older Pavotube. Now, that said, in terms of physical quality, I think one of the best improvements is because it is now shorter and it has mounting points. You can now stand the light up with a certain stand quite easily. And even if you don't use a stand, it is easier to stand and lean on the wall because it is shorter and it doesn't have weird mounting points at the back. So you can actually quite easily put it in most places now. Okay, now that's all for the physical aspect of it. It is still, at least from my knowledge, it is still not a weather sealed light, so don't put it in the rain. And that, let's look at the light quality itself. Now, first, let's look at its CCT quality. And now, if you actually see the light, this is where the biggest difference is. Now, the older light, you can actually see unevenness within the tube itself, and it has little dots or bulbs inside them. Now, the newer light, it is totally even at its lowest power. I mean, you can probably see like a strip in the center. That's because how they align it. But the bulbs are smaller, and they tend to have less, unevenness within the tube itself. And this is important if you're going to use the light as a placement in the scene, using it as an effects, and you want to use it at low power. The bulbless design will be a little bit more pleasing than the one on the older Pavotube. But other than that, first, let's talk about the range of the standard CCT mode. The CCT mode goes from 2,700 to 12,000, one of the biggest range you can get in the market. The older one only goes from 2,700 all the way to about 6,500. In fact, let me show you guys how it looks like from 2,700 to all the way to 12,000. In fact, let's take a look at here. This, I believe, is 12K. This is 2,700. Look at how wide the difference is in terms of its color. 2,700 to 12,000 is a very, very huge gap. And I believe that the new Pavotube allows you such a range is a very good thing. Now, in addition to that, of course, there is the green and magenta shifting to just even out the light and then balance it across. But other than that, there's nothing too special about it. Now, the CCT mode is, of course, the mode that we will measure color accuracy to. Firstly, I use a Sekonic C700 here. And I will say as I take a few photos with the lights and both the new and the old, and I tabulated the results. Firstly, I would say as the newer light, it is brighter. In most settings, you can see that it is slightly brighter than the older lights. And then secondly, in terms of color accuracy, it is also more accurate in terms of CRI. In terms of light deviation from its selected Kelvin behind, it is also more accurate, usually less than 200 difference, except when it is at 12,000, it goes 800. But the older light will just deviate at about 6,000 plus, it will start deviating significantly, because the range is only up to 6,500. So the newer light in a nutshell, it is a better light. It is slightly brighter, it is slightly more accurate, and also it is slightly more consistent throughout. And most importantly, it is also more even throughout the light itself. Now, of course, that is the first mode, which is a CCT, which usually as I said, we use it for general lighting and measurement. Next, we look at the color effects, because that's the whole point of owning tube lights. And the color effects on both of these lights are quite similar, if you ask me. Let me just brighten this up. Now, newer and older versions of both these lights are quite similar. They allow you to change to any HSI setting or RGB setting. The difference is, of course, once again, the consistency of the light. You can actually see the bulbs for the red color one, and you cannot see the bulbs for the other one. In fact, just for even comparison, I will just switch it to red too, so that you can actually see how it looks like both in red. Now, this is actually the problem with this light, because the buttons are really slow. Pressing it all the way to red is taking some time. But you can see that the red here is also significantly more consistent, and you cannot see the bulbs even in this brightness level. So this is a nice thing. The old one, you can actually see it, but when I try it in video, you probably can't tell at all. So let me show you a short little clip, because I actually did some video with my lights in some special effect colors like teal and orange, and I'll show you some video here now. Now, I shot that video with Ryuki, and I was using both of these tubes in teal and orange mode, and it gives a very nice effect. And the other light was the Pavotube 6C within the scene itself. So overall, when it comes to color effect lights and for the purpose of lighting the environment, the newer Pavotubes are very nice, slightly better than the older one, because it is firstly more consistent, and then overall, it just looks nicer in the scene, especially now that the tube has lesser black in the front and the back of the tube itself. Now, the tube has, of course, more effects. So let me show you some other effects within the newer tube. So if I press the mode, I have the effects one, and then you can press trigger, you can trigger the effects itself. Nothing too special here. I mean, you can control it through wireless. That's, of course, the biggest improvement. Later, I'll talk about it. And then there is now the pixel mode. The pixel mode is really cool. I mean, without plugging into anything, you can see the pixel mode is actually different color in different section of the lights. The shorter one can have less choices. The bigger one, you can actually split the light to a little bit more. I mean, each section is about the same for the bigger one, but the bigger one just has more lights to it. Now, this is, of course, all using the controls within the light itself. And as I said, the biggest advantage of this light is this new wireless mode. And let me show you the wireless mode now. One of the newest improvement is actually the new application that you can control the light with. This is called Nanlite, and you can now control the Pavotube using the application without any additional hardware. Just that connecting with the application at times can be a little bit iffy, and also to make sure that your Pavotube works with the application requires a little bit of initial process, and that is upgrading the firmware. Now, upgrading the firmware is not a very hard process. If everything goes smoothly, you load the firmware into the drive and just plug in, and then upgrade the firmware itself. Not too tough. However, it is a roll of dice at times, because depending on the memory card you use, or the memory stick, or the USB drive you use, when you plug in, it may not work. It only accepts FAT32 and FAT, which means you should get a relatively small storage drive, like less than 16 gig, to make sure that it's always FAT or FAT32, and then format it properly, and then you can actually utilize it. Now, even then, it may not work. I have a light that doesn't work with my blue color 8 gig drive here. I have to use my SD card drive here. So that is the difference. But yes, so it's a bit of luck, but upgrading the firmware already allows you to control the light through the application. And controlling light with the application is actually a very nice experience overall. Now, it is, of course, not as responsive as the Series Link. I mean, that app has been iterated many, many times. It's still quite a good experience. I mean, you can just quickly change the light setting. Now, this is not like Series Link or like the Wii Lights app, where you actually change the setting immediately as you drag the bar around. You only sends the command after you lift your finger up, so you can actually preview the setting as you drag it around to actually have a feel of it. So you have to drag, let go, drag, let go. That is only the downsides to it. And you can really go from like 2,700 easily to like 12,000 quickly with this application itself. Now, then you can actually go to like say HSI mode. Once you go to HSI mode, you can actually control the color of the light quite easily, or you can go by hue set also, or you can just select a color on the color wheel. And there is a cool function using the camera, and let's say I take a picture of, let's say, my mattress cover here. It's like maroon color now. And then I press done. It will actually change my light to maroon color. I'm not really sure you can see in the camera or not, but yeah, it looks maroon to me now. But that being said, you can actually change to any color light you want quite easily, and you can of course take a picture to just match the light if needed. Now this is HSI mode. Effects mode wise on the application makes no difference, except that now it's easier to control, easier to set, but I will not say as it is a groundbreaking thing. The cool part is actually the next one, which is, I feel, called the pixel effect. Now, pixel effect allows you to control the light in different sections. There are many things like the rainbow hue, very smooth color gradation, very good for effects wise. But I think the cool one is like multi-color. Allows you to select what color you want. So the first color I can have red, the second color I can have, say, I do not know, let me think, maybe in the between, maybe blue. So I can have, running lights of red and blue. And I can go backwards, I can make it flash and what's not. And if I was in multi-color mode like this, I can actually dim and make them brighter and make them dimmer together. Now, the multi-color mode also allows you to actually even add additional lights. You don't want 2 color, you want 4 color, you can do it too. And then once again, let me add in, let's say, purple. And then the last one, let me add in as maybe green. So you get a multi-color here. Now this is a multi-color mode where you just want the lights to be all evenly bright. But you can also actually select one mode called process, which is the cool one. You can set a background light and a foreground light. So the background light I can select and dim it totally, so it looks like a black darkness. And then the foreground light I can make it really bright, so that it's quite obvious it is the foreground light. It looks like a pixel now on the screen. And then I can even give a color to it, and then play around with the saturation like this. So this is actually really nice as something like a loading bar. If you want to make something like a loading bar, you can go backward, forward. You make something like a loading bar, you can make backward, forward. You can make it symmetrical, like a loading bar. You can make it flash, or you can make it pulsate. So as a video light, this effect is actually really, really, really cool. And you can even control the length of the pixels. So you want to make it smaller pixels or larger pixels. So the newer pixel effect mode allows you to do quite interesting stuff. I mean, allows you to play around with different lights, making lights that light up only in certain areas of the tube, or making multicolor lights that move around the tube itself. So that is one of the nice effects. And then you can actually go back to CCT mode and then just control again. So the light also now allows you to actually off it using the application, where it slowly dims off to darkness, or you can just use the thing drag to 0%. It also works that way. So there is a nice touch. The older lights, the only way to dim it to 0% is to like turn it all the way down. Now this one can on and off. You can on and off the fading, fade up and fade down easily with the touch of a button on the application. The one thing I didn't touch about is price. And I can tell you that the price of this tube light is an increment over the old one. It now costs 700 plus USD in BH Photo and 800 plus Sing dollars in Singapore itself. In fact, you can see the both screens here for the exact pricing. So the price have increased. And by the way, the pricing just now was for the pair. You can buy a single tube one, which is like half the price. So yeah, the tubes are now more expensive than before. Now, compared to the older power tubes, if you ask me, do you think that the older power tubes are still worth it to purchase at a cheaper price? If you are just looking for color lights, the older power tubes will work. The older power tube 15C will work. If you are looking for lights with better effects, better controls, I will highly recommend that you actually get the latest Pavotube 215X, because it has more capabilities. Now, you may be wondering then again, how does this compare up to the cheap China lights? And let me show you this video here. Actually, my light is in the scene at one side, and then the rest of them is related by cheap China tube lights. They are very affordable. However, for this particular video here, there is nothing special, so you don't see a difference. But when you start measuring them and when you start actually using them for lighting purposes, this thing is more accurate. And also, it has a nicer gradation, nicer, evenness across the tube compared to those China light, which actually you can actually see the individual bulbs of those light. But for the purpose of a video or photo, most of the time, it is not too problematic unless you are using it at a very dim mode. And if you are using it at a very dim mode, especially if you want the color to come out really nicely, then the newer power tubes are slightly better than even any of the China Lights or any of the older power tubes themselves. And this is the end of the review of the new Pavotube 215X, which is a marked improvement over the old Pavotube 15C. Overall, if you like power tubes and you want the best of the best tube now, I think this tube is one of the best now. Now, if you just want a color light, the old Pavotube 15C will probably get you there at a slightly lower cost. And that's about it for today. I hope you enjoy this, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.